Boo. Greetings, my beautiful friends and fellow students of art. Welcome back to Art Appreciation! They say before we had text, we had textiles. Textiles are probably the oldest art, but because they're so perishable, we don't really have much evidence of them. You know, the stone and clay stuff lasts, and so do our bones, but we are so much more than our bones. And culture is much more than stone and clay artifacts. Even though, many archaeologists and philosophers say that in the beginning was the stone. Actually, in the beginning was probably the cloth. It's blanky. It's our clothes. It's our second skin, which is why today we go deep into indigenous American textiles and fiber arts, our connective tissue, our second skin. And we're going to look at some amazing artists who work with fiber and textiles. So be sure to take out a pen and jot down the names of the ones that you love. And don't forget to draw. And yeah, we don't really have any much of the ancient textiles, American textiles, but we do have those Adena stone tablets that were used to print patterns onto woven cloth. Of course, by the time we were carving patterns to print onto fabric, we were also carving those same patterns and tattooing those patterns into our skin. Tattooing patterns and memories was a way to keep them with us. And also printing these patterns onto our bodies and onto our clothes is a way to keep them with us. And today, however, we're going to mostly talk about the textile arts that were not meant to be worn, like flags and rugs and assemblages. And we're going to appreciate these complicated textiles in light of that human technology of enchantment, right? It's textiles. I also love that printing technology, which is usually attributed to European inventors, was already present and functioning in the Americas in the Mississippian era. So traditionally, textiles are made of fibers, taken from plants like cotton or from animals. It's animal hair, which is made of a strong protein called keratin. But some threads are made of silk, which is what exactly? Worm semen? Worm excretion? What? It's produced by pupating larvae for cocoons, a protective shell which aids in a being's complex metamorphosis. Sound familiar? Silk is actually produced by several insects, and it kind of resembles how hair is produced by mammals and human hair. Human hair, remember, is considered by many people to be a kind of extension of the soul, probably because it mainly grows out of our heads. Textiles, they play an important role in our history. The earliest accounts we have of contact between indigenous peoples and Europeans, the Vikings, around 1000 AD, are stories about trading red cloth for beaver pelts. And the records were preserved in the sagas of Eric the Red. But we also have winter counts like the American Horse winter count that includes a tiny drawing of 2 American flags representing the year 1805 when Lewis and Clark visited. The winter count, it tells a story of these 2 white guys who gave the Lakota these textiles with stars and stripes on them that they touched and honored and said that they could never touch the ground. And there are a number of contemporary artists who work with flags specifically because flags are more than just colored pieces of fabric. I'm really interested in how flags function as magical power objects with dances and ceremonies and protocols surrounding their appearance and display. Of course, Native peoples also have power objects like rattles and fans and drums, pipes, objects that Edward Curtis would have paid a lot of money to get to take pictures of. And, these are artworks that are treated with great respect. There is an interesting relationship between flags, blankets, and placentas. Sloterdijk tells a story from Egypt of how the pharaoh always kept his mummified placenta with him and guarded day and night. And in public gatherings, he'd parade the mummified placenta in front of everyone like a flag. Placentas, they matter in ancient cultures, and they matter to babies inside the womb today. Ultrasounds at 5 months reveal fetuses petting it, for lack of a better term. And I guess, the placenta in a way is the child's first friend or womb mate. And it relates to baby blankets and to the psychology of comfort objects. But yeah, the placenta was considered by Pharaoh to be the incarnation of his soul. And it's his double. And because it was, it protected him inside the womb, it also was believed to protect him outside the womb, sort of like a guardian angel. And according to Egyptologist Alward Blackman, quote, while in one aspect the placenta ghost is a protecting genius, in the other it is the force that controls and suggests a man's thoughts and actions. In short, in the latter aspect, it is his personality, end quote. I think it's interesting that clothing and textiles and hair also help to define and influence one's personality, as do flags. The ancient custom of carrying the pharaoh's placenta ahead of the ruler in procession is probably where we get today's national flag rituals. Harold Bloom, a famous professor of the humanities, he's kind of famous for pointing out how our United States post-Christian, pro-life, nationalist religion fuses together the human fetus and the flag into one sign, which is kind of interesting. But what all this means is that textiles are full of significance and magic. There's another famous story about the conquest of the Inca and how shocked the Spaniards were that the Inca warriors didn't bother to protect their stocks of gold and silver, and instead they did everything that they could to destroy their warehouses of textiles, to keep them from falling into the invaders' hands. And this is because textiles were the most important medium to record and convey mystical and religious conceptions. Textiles, they are markers of identity, like the Mayan mannequin scepter, or like placentas, like flags. Textiles can transfer power to the wearer, right? And they can make that person more memorable. Let's quickly zoom in and look at a new little bit of information that just appeared in the world earlier this year. This is the oldest piece of string. It's 6 millimeters long, 0.5 millimeter wide, and it's made from pine tree bark. It was found in a layer of earth near the Neander Valley, dated about 50,000 years old. 50,000 years old! Older than the cave paintings. According to archaeologists, this little piece of string belonged to a group of Neanderthals, Homo neanderthalensis, and they found it wedged into a stone tool, which protected it. And don't let the size of this artifact confuse you. This little bit of string implies a whole host of other technologies that had to be there in order for the string to be there. It's sort of like how we looked deeply at a sheet of paper, or how a tiny flame requires an entire atmosphere. This bit of string means that Neanderthals had a detailed understanding of trees and how to transform them into entirely different functional substances. It's alchemy. It's early science. And the twisted fibers also mean the presence of traps, nets, bags, baskets, cloth, rope, potentially even boats. And of course, a more basic, creative, artistic transformation of one substance into another. It's early art, Homo neanderthalensis. We had no idea. All right, now let's take a step back, way back. We are like ants crawling across a Navajo sand painting rug. We cannot see what other than human powers and relationships are at work here, beyond the thresholds of our perception. And we should consider how weaving itself is often seen as a gift from the gods, like fire, or agriculture, or language and sports and mathematics. Weaving has its own origin story. And according to Frank Water and White Bear Frederick's famous version of the Hopi myth histories, Spider-Woman created humans and taught them to weave, but these first people could not speak. And she had to ask Sotuknang to deliver language and sexuality to humans. And in a Navajo vision, Spider-Woman instructed Navajo women how to weave on a loom that Spider-Man told them how to make. So he makes the loom, she weaves the world. And this is a cosmic story. Gladys Richards' retelling of the Navajo myth history focuses on how the first cross pulls for the first loom were made of sky and earth cords. The first warp sticks were made of sun rays. And the first loom was also made of lightning and crystals, shells and rain. We see the story of creation, the story of the world is told through the imagery of weaving. And weavers, like medicine men, they begin at a very young age. I've read about a ritual of Dene babies, female babies, who shortly after birth go to a spider's web with the medicine man, and when the child touches the web, that's when she becomes a weaver. And then there are also legends of humans elsewhere learning how to write by tracing patterns from spiders' webs. And this further connects weaving with language. Also, I love the Upanishads, the Vedic Upanishads from India. They use the image of a spider to describe the universe. Quote, "We are like the spider. We weave our life and then move along in it. We are like the dreamer who dreams and then lives inside the dream." End quote. And in Buddhism, the term for holy texts is sutra, which means thread, like suture. And the term for the highest teachings and spiritual practices is tantra, which means weaving. And we can find abundant mythological evidence, numerous yarns that support this association between the weaving of fabric, the weaving of the universe, and the weaving of stories. Stories that, remember, are used to bring people together into a community. The point is that, like language and texts, woven textiles are part of what is sometimes called the social glue. And it's a primal metaphor for creation in general, and how we are all connected. Let's not forget the blanket truth scene in I Heart Huckabees.
Okay, let's get started.
Is this part of my investigation?
Yes. Say this blanket represents all the matter and energy in the universe, okay? You, me, everything. Nothing has been left out, all right? All the particles, everything.
What's outside this blanket?
More blankets, that's the point.
Blanket's everything.
Exactly. This is everything, okay? Let's just say that this is me, right? And I'm, 60-odd years old, and I'm wearing a gray suit, blah, blah, blah. And let's say over here, this is you, and you're, I don't know, you're 21, you've got dark hair, etc. And over here, this is Vivian, my wife and colleague. And then over here, this is the Eiffel Tower, right? It's Paris. And this is a war, and this is a museum, and this is a disease, and this is an orgasm, and this is a hammer.
Everything is the same, even if it's different.
Exactly. But our everyday mind forgets this. We think everything is separate, limited. I'm over here, you're over there, which is true. But it's not the whole truth, because we're all connected. Because we are connected.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
So textile imagery is everywhere. And weaving in the Southwest United States is also, of course, entangled with the history of sheep. And be sure to read the Materials in Focus section of the textbook on page 75 to 76 about various wools that are used for Navajo weaving. Essentially, the Spanish originally brought over the merino wool, a breed that was really soft. It was from the southeast of Spain, but it was the churro sheep, a breed brought to the Iberian Peninsula by Muslims 1,000 years ago, which was much better suited for the arid Southwest. And that coarser, stronger wool was much easier to spin than the more delicate merino. And we also know today that weavers, they'll dress up to weave like they're going to church. And they wear jewelry because weaving is prayer. It's communion, it's creation, it's sacred, and it's multisensorial. There's a sense of touch, a haptic dimension. And none of our conversations about blankets and how, they look and function should neglect a space for how they feel. The weight of a Northwest Coast Chilcat blanket, for example, is arguably as important as the meaning of the designs on its surface. Or at least it's another kind of meaning that registers on a more visceral level. At first, textiles were rather mono or bichromatic, very limited palette, as we see with the popular two gray hills style. But you could get a variety of grays just from two sheep. Colors were added as they became available, first with red by unraveling traded fabrics from Mexico, mostly. And then, of course, by importing the colorful yarn from Philadelphia, from Germantown. But remember that the appearance of this colorful yarn had a dark shadow side. It's associated, that these new colors are associated with Bosque Redondo and the Long Walk, that massacre where over 2,000 Dene and Apache died. And remember those, the government issued baize, or it's a sort of cheap flannel blankets. They were unraveled, unspun, and rewoven into blankets that were made of indigenous patterns and stories. In fact, it's said that women's knowledge of weaving helped indigenous peoples survive cultural genocide, without a doubt. And like ledger art, the textiles are proof of war crimes. That pre-spun yarn, combined with the internment and imprisonment during this period, the mid-1860s, it freed up a lot of time for the weavers to work on their new, eye-dazzlingly complex patterns. Originally, the red yarns were dyed with cochineal insects. It's a bug from Europe, and it was imported to Mexico during the 18th and 19th centuries, a few hundred years after the horses and the sheep arrived. In the earliest dated Navajo weavings with the cochineal red is this dress fragment recovered from Canyon de Muertos massacre cave. And then we also have this, another famous Navajo textile, the Chantelin blanket. The story of this blanket is amazing. How it was found and by whom. Now it's a superstar. Be sure to go online and check it out for yourself. It goes to show you how much we value these Navajo textiles. This one sold at auction for almost $2 million. Remember that it was the early reservation period when Navajo wearing blankets turned into Navajo rugs for the white market. And the Navajo had to actually start importing their ceremonial wearing blankets from Pendleton because all of their weavers were busy churning out the eye-dazzling rugs for the white market. And there was pressure from the market to put a border around the rug compositions, to put a frame around it, to make it resemble Oriental rugs, which the European buyers were used to. And this led some weavers to include a secret spirit line in the corner of the design. Look for it next time you see a Navajo rug. It's different for everyone. Some make it invisible, while others make it very present. It's described as a pathway for the mind or spirit to exit the design, the blanket design. It's a crack in the design, a passage, a doorway. And it's also a way to make the rug slightly imperfect. And this helps the weaver let go of it. Each family has developed their own kind of spirit line. Master weaver Linda Teller-Peet says that some weavers call it the doorway. And it's placed at the beginning of the rug and not towards the end like other people do it. I've heard of a weaver's family call it the bloodline, and they weave a small, fine strand of red wool down the middle of the textile that no one can see, the bloodline. Be sure to see Jill Yohei's essay called Situated Flow, a few thoughts on reweaving meaning in the Navajo spirit pathway. It's really good. Okay, now let's quickly look at some of my favorite contemporary textile artists. We begin with Jeffery Gibson and his cosmopolitan garments. What do they remind you of? Cosmopolitan is a useful term used to describe art that appears cross-cultural or hybrid, planetary, border crossing. Gibson's work hangs on wooden rods like Japanese kimono. And for the next 6 minutes, let's listen to him talk about these cosmopolitan, unplaceable garments.
So there was something normalizing about aligning myself within an art context. I didn't feel strange. I didn't feel peripheral. I started feeling more and more central, that this was my world that I belonged in.
I think Jeff's voice is an important voice. It brings together so many different references, and the fact that he takes freely from these references, it's very, I think, very liberating. He takes from pop culture, he takes from queer culture, he takes from his own Native American heritage. It's a mashup, but it's a beautiful, artful mashup.
I think my work is not so much advocating for one particular demographic as much as it's saying everybody is equally as complex. Like, we're all kind of equally as messed up as we are really pulled together.
I had always really enjoyed seeing Jeff's work. I think it's really significant work. He's an important voice today. We decided we wanted to acquire a work of his for the Wellens collection, and in 2016 we acquired A Very Easy Death, and it comes from a Simone de Beauvoir memoir.
It's about her dying mother and her not so great relationship with her dying mother. And this negotiation of somebody who you have respect for, you have tremendous love for, but you just can't get along. And I think when you're in that existential moment, that period in your life, what you want is honesty. You want transparency, and you want honesty, and you want someone to validate the way you're feeling. And I think this idea that you're supposed to get over it is ridiculous, and is in a weird way this like blockage to us actually evolving emotionally. What I love about the things that I relate to, like let's say adornment, decorative pattern, pop music, they already are functioning. I don't have to raise them from the dead. They're already moving and people are already paying attention to them.
He's drawing upon the kind of pop music that was really both gender bending and also expressing a very clear element of understanding the self.
That they were like anthems, that we all have our own version of, but these anthems that I think they really are like the soundtrack to how you imagine yourself being.
It was a way of defining yourself. It was a way of having a dialogue with others.
When I look back, it makes a lot of sense why these spaces had to be charged with such celebratory positivity, specifically in LGBT nightclubs, people looking for hope, people hoping for change, and creating a space where people felt safe. Because when the lights came on at 5 a.m., you had to return to the rest of the world.
So he's had a very interesting upbringing in that he has seen a lot of different cultures from all over the world growing up at a time when we're all really open to what those influences are.
Living in Germany, Korea, going to school in England, when you arrive there, you're American first and foremost. And the negotiation of finding your place within another culture, you go from being an observer to hopefully one day you're a participant, but you also know how to pull yourself back out and observe.
He's also half Choctaw, half Cherokee, and so he is drawing upon his experience and his heritage there.
And I think that's really my contribution, because I'm not really inherently of any one specific identity or one cultural identity, that I can articulate that spectrum.
With the garments, Jeff is actually incorporating images of his previous work. He's at a point in his career where he has created this incredible visual vocabulary, and he can draw upon that to talk about the things that are important to him.
But in the world of art, painting, sculpture, installation, photography, video, how does a garment fit into that? When something is 120 pounds and you're forced to summon energy to move, that is a metaphor for the way that I feel about being in this brown body. And you don't want to give your skin this much credit. You really don't. I don't want to think that my skin and body have that much impact on the way that people view me. A presumed set of politics, a presumed voice, a presumed community that I come from, all of which is determined before I open my mouth. You could let all of this weight make you suddenly go into a total stasis and not move. But when you feel something pushing back against you, you know you're moving. The people wearing them become these non-placeable warriors of fighting for kitsch, camp, love, peace, war. And so I was like, this is what I want with the helmet. This is your defensive gear.
But instead they become these symbolic moments of expressions, and they're really beautiful and exuberant, but at the same time they're a little bit oppressive too, because there's almost too much.
And eventually that the person would get so kind of subsumed into the helmet, they would actually become just another object in this mass.
Jeffery Gibson, he's probably most famous for these beaded punching bags that he decorates to look like jingle dancers, a great blending of the masculine and feminine symbolism. And I'd love to hear what you all think about this. And also, remember, you can do something like this. You could make a type of helmet or armor used to protect yourself. And but what I want you to really keep in mind is that all of these artists, they're using found objects, donated quilts, or things that are found at a thrift store to create art. Cannupa Hanska Luger is another one of my favorites. and he repurposes crocheted sofa throws, that your grandmother made, but then got donated to a thrift store. And he'll combine these with other objects in his installations. Here's a new work exhibited as part of the current show at the Heard Museum called Larger Than Memory. It's called This Is Not a Snake. Larger Than Memory. Eric Paul Riege, another great artist, he likes to enlarge native jewelry to bring attention to its history. It's a new take on the soft sculpture. But Riege is also concerned with the mythological or mythopoeic power of weaving. And he performs a weaving dance and other performance-related activities that you should totally check out. I posted all these links to his website and to some videos in our Blackboard folder. Meryl McMaster. We looked at her last week at her ancestral series where she projected Edward Curtis photographs onto her face. She also designs textiles to tell stories about identity, and then she photographs herself wearing the textiles in the landscape. Definitely check out her new work and consider that you can do something like this for your final art project. Here is a new piece by Jean Quick-to-See Smith, the painter who made the dripping map paintings. She works with her son to create this nod to Truman Lowe. Remember Truman Lowe's beautiful, simple wooden waterfall installations. So this is one of her trade canoes filled with fry bread. And notice that she brings attention to the string that's used to tie the canoe together. And then I really love multiracial artist Natalie Ball. She's collaging together materials, creating assemblages. Everyone is doing it, bringing together found objects to make art, repurposing, remixing. God, I love how she uses old star quilts and towels and, all kinds of things. It kind of reminds me of ghost dance dresses, where we see textiles blend with armor in a lot of interesting ways. She also says that she works from the perspective of a future ancestor. And she likes how ancestors leave the world evidence of art. They leave the world these strange multicultural heirlooms. And maybe these are also meant to be beacons of some sort. She's she's using materials that we usually associate with comfort and domesticity with women dwellings, but then she mixes them with materials that we associate with the hunt and the masculine, like in her Pussy Hats series or her Breastplate series. In Pussy Hats, instead of the bright pink knit beanies that we might expect from the Women's March, instead we find these really strange sculptures that conjure other aspects of the female body and political rage. We've got punching gloves, hair, shells, textiles. Also, these hats are reminiscent of heads on spikes, and so they bring to mind soldiers and the casualties of war. The artist says, quote, "I believe historical discourses of Native Americans have constructed a limited and inconsistent visual archive that currently misrepresents our past experiences and misinforms current expectations," end quote. She's trying to mix it up. And she was also featured in a recent exhibit at IAIA called Connective Tissue. Be sure to check that out. And go to Natalie Ball's website after this lecture and scroll through her brilliant, playful, often confusing, but daring works to get some more ideas about what you can make for your final project. There are so many more textile artists I want to look at. Melissa Cody, Marie Watt, Wally Dion. But we're going to end today by looking at Gina Adams, a good friend of mine, and her broken treaty quilts. This is her first one. Fort Laramie Broken Treaty quilt, and she plans to make all of them, every single Broken Treaty. And she says that she'll take the original font from the treaty and enlarge it, and then she cuts out the letters and quilts them in order to memorialize the treaty. You know, and there's this whole history of quilts being used to bring attention to social issues. And she also says that enlarging and making the broken treaties beautiful gives them more power. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Remember to post your notes and that art makes you smart. Okay, bye. Bow, boo, boo.